Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow.
Everybody, welcome to the broadcast. As most of you know, we've got an office in Jerusalem, Israel, have had it for well over a decade. We've been heavily engaged in Middle East issues, whether it's on a diplomatic front. I've represented Israel's interests before the International Criminal Court in The Hague, the Office of the Prosecutor at the ICC. We've been saying for a long time that there was a proxy war going on between Iran and Israel, and the proxy was Syria. Well, that proxy kind of almost has been sidestepped. And now you have a situation that has developed with an Iranian drone launched from Syria, infiltrated Israeli airspace. An Israeli Apache helicopter intercepted the drone before it could cause any damage. Now, in response to this, Israel targeted 12 sites, 8 Syrian, 4 Iranian. That's right, Iranian sites inside of, in the area of Damascus, Syria, several which were part of Iran's military establishment in Syria. Of note, the Israeli ministry said this drone was based on an American stealth drone, a Lockheed Martin RQ-170 Sentinel, intercepted by Iran 6 years ago in 2011.
That was the Obama administration, which, again, that drone was intercepted, and instead of demanding that the drone be returned, the Obama administration, with their usual foreign policy lapse, Iran was able to keep the drone, reverse engineered it, and as you see, they did a decent job of reverse engineering that drone. It was moving very quickly into Israeli territory, causing this response from Israel. And then you've got a downed Israeli fighter jet.
First time since 1982 that an Israeli jet had been taken down while engaged in conflict. And that was, the pilots did escape. Both the pilot and the navigator were able to escape or eject before it crashed in northern Israel. And they are both reported as safe. But this is the first time that the Israelis lost an advanced jet fighter since 1982 and the war with Lebanon. So you could see what's happening. It's not so much a proxy right now. This is direct conflict. We're going to be joined in the next segment of our broadcast by our senior military analyst and also our director of our Law of War project at the ACLJ. Remember, we handle a lot of these legal engagement issues that come up when you've got armed conflict. And as I said, we've been to the International Criminal Court in The Hague's Office of the Prosecutor, where they had what's called an NGO roundtable, where you presented various arguments. The Palestinian Authority had lodged a complaint. We represented Israel's interests. There were 4 lawyers on our side, 4 on their side, and you presented these arguments back and forth. Ultimately, the Office of the Prosecutor dismissed it on jurisdictional grounds. I will tell you this. We are just filing today through our European Center for Law and Justice another brief on this issue of jurisdiction of Israel at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. That document actually being filed today. So a lot going on that front. And again, we don't just talk about it on this broadcast. Our offices are engaged in it as well. We've got a lot more ahead on what is a breaking issue involving Israel and Iran, a direct conflict. This is not a proxy war. This is direct engagement. Back with more in just a moment. So if you're just joining us, there was conflict over the weekend, and it was between really Iran and Israel. And Iran was using Syria as its launching base, and the Israelis took down a drone that was an Iranian drone based on American technology. It was American technology because it was captured about 6 years ago by the Iranian regime. And we used to talk about a proxy war, and not that that doesn't exist anymore, but the Iranians clearly have upped it in the northern border of Israel with the direct engagement. These are Iranian military installations. The United States has issued a statement. The United States is deeply concerned about today's escalation of violence over Israel's border and strongly supports Israel's sovereign right to defend itself. Then as it relates to Iran, this is what the United States has officially said. Iran's calculated escalation of threat and its ambition to project its power and dominance places all people of the region from Yemen to Lebanon at risk. I'm going to go to Skip Ash. Colonel Ash runs our Law of War project. Because our war engaged armed conflict. We talked about, Skip, the idea that you have a proxy war going on, which you have had with Iran using Syria as a proxy. This appears to be direct engagement, and that's different and also impacts the law of war.
That's exactly
and
right.
long conflict. Yep.
What's happened in the past is they've used Hezbollah, they used Syrian forces as their proxies to attack Israel. Now they have forces on the ground in Syria, and they're making decisions, and they are directly engaging Israel by sending this drone over Israeli sovereign territory. The Israelis had the right, the absolute right under international law to defend themselves, to defend their territory from attacks. This was an attempt to attack Israel, even if just to get information. We don't know whether this was an armed drone or just a drone seeking information, but be that as it may, they have the right to protect their sovereign airspace, and they've taken it. And there's a warning to Syria. If you allow your territory to be used by a foreign nation to attack Israel, then not only will Israel attack the Iranians, but they'll also attack the supporting Syrian forces, and that's what's happened this weekend.
Wes, how do you view this? I mean, I look at this as an escalation. I'm going to go to the Jordan in this in a minute because there's legal issues here and political issues. But this is clear that Iran has put its, we've been engaged in this region for well over almost 2 decades, but I mean, significantly over the last 10 or 15 years. And we've got an office in the heart of Jerusalem. We're going to be joined by our legal director from our Jerusalem office in the next segment of the broadcast. But how do you view this now direct engagement by Iran?
Yeah, it's unprecedented. It really is. As you said earlier, normally it's Iranian proxies that are on the border, bothering Israel. This is the first time that it's a direct engagement. And to show you just how serious this is and how serious Israel is taking this, over the weekend, after all these incidents happened, they moved multiple Iron Dome batteries, their anti-missile defense systems, to the northern part of Israel. And at the same time, Israel said when those 8 F-16s went into Syria over the weekend that they destroyed one half of the air defense missile sites in southern Syria, which says to me that Israel is thinking there may be more to come, and they want to keep their planes safe.
The Prime Minister of Israel spoke out on this. Let me go to Benjamin Netanyahu's statement just yesterday.
Yesterday, we landed hard blows on the forces of Iran and Syria. We made unequivocally clear to everyone that our modus operandi has not changed one jot. We will continue to hit back for every attempt to harm us, for any blow inflicted on us. This has been our policy, and this will remain our policy.
What's interesting to me in all of this now is Iran is becoming front and center in both the statements. Yep. This is not proxy. This is actual. We've been talking about this for a decade. We've got actually a documentary we're doing on this right now. That's in process being edited, I believe.
Yeah, it's pretty much done.
Yeah, so hopefully that'll get out really soon because that's an important documentary that we put together with experts from around the world on it. But anyways, the fact that Iran now is being called out directly.
Yes, and Iran in 2 different statements that conflict with each other. One from their Iranian military spokesman on the Iran state TV said that the reports of downing Iranian drone flying over Israel and Iran's involvement in attacking Israeli jet are ridiculous. Iran only provides military advice to Syria based on the request of the country's legitimate government. They mean the Assad regime. But the Brigadier General Hassan Salami, his statement from Iran was, "We cannot confirm this report on the drone because Israelis are liars. If Syrians confirm it, Iran will confirm it as well." So he is not denying
no, they are not.
that this is the Iranian drone. So that spokesperson got out ahead of the actual military leader in Iran. And the truth is, I think what they're trying to weigh is, do they want to highlight this as a part of Iranian aggression, or, oops, did we go too far? And is Tehran under threat now from a possible is this what gives Israel the ability and under international law the right to go right at Iranian military sites inside not just Syria but Iran?
Yeah, so
because that's where this drone would have originated from.
So let me tell you what we are filing. It's going to be filed today. So we have filed with the International Criminal Court in The Hague through our European Center for Law and Justice, which is an NGO recognized by the United Nations. We have filed it's called the issue of the ICC jurisdiction, factual and legal analysis to assist the prosecutor in determining whether the International Criminal Court may lawfully assert its jurisdiction over nationals of the State of Israel, a non-consenting, non-party state to the Rome Statute. The Rome Statute is the ICC statute. That's what created the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Now, Skip, we've won that issue once already at the office of the prosecutor, but we're doing this preemptively, especially as this Iranian conflict escalates. But I think it's important for you to state again for our audience, from an international law perspective, Israel was clearly within its rights to engage the enemy the way they did, including the Iranian troops that were there working on this or seeking to harm Israel.
A drone, which is a military instrument, across your border, across a border into another sovereign state is a hostile act. and Israel, as a sovereign state, has the absolute right and obligation to its own citizens to defend the citizens from such hostile acts. So when they go after, not only bring down the drone, but to go after those who fired the drone, so to speak, who allowed it to take off and gave it its mission, that is absolutely something that is allowed under the law of armed conflict, and that governs what Israel does. And Israel scrupulously observes the law of armed conflict, despite the fact that its opponents do not.
I'm going to say Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran do not play by the rules of the law of armed conflict or the Geneva Conventions. They just don't. That's just fact. You usually have this, what I call dual front war. You've got the border with Gaza and then the north, Golan. And usually those are in conflicts at the same time.
Right. Clearly,
you've got a conflict brewing in the north with Syria and Iran. Hamas, on the other hand, is in complete disarray in Gaza. And Gaza is a humanitarian disaster right now. It is a disaster across the board. They cannot govern. They cannot feed their people. They've created and there's no support for that within the Arab world. But there is a united Arab world on the Iranian threat. So how does that play into this?
Yeah, it's interesting because Hamas has done a horrible job of administering, the Gaza Strip. And the Arab world, they are weary of the mismanagement and the corruption down there. On the other hand, Jay, in the past, at least 3 other times, when Hamas gets in trouble, in order to gain support and sympathy from the wider Arab world, they attack Israel from the south.
Yeah.
So that is something I think Israel has to be concerned about. But on the northern side,
I don't think they will get any support for that, though, of significant support in the Arab world, geopolitically.
Right now, I don't know that they have the resources to even carry out that attack. And if the people may revolt against Hamas, that's probably what their leaders are weighing, is that in the past, if things were getting not so good, you'd have a war with Israel, and then Israel would come in with aid, actually, and probably rebuild the areas it struck down, probably send in some food, take care of people that need medical help. In this situation, if things are as bad as the New York Times is reporting, that Gaza is on the edge of exploding.
Our reports have indicated that, too, from our people on the ground.
What we may see, in fact, is the fall of the Hamas government, which would be a good thing. But again, it puts
Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a terrorist organization.
Puts the region in turmoil. And a lot of this is because Israel's closed up the underground supply lines. Egypt is no longer working with Hamas and allowing them to smuggle across the border there. So when you have the two, and the rest of the Arab world really, again, having no patience for a group like this. And I think this goes to also what's happened to the Syria conflict. Syria and Iran would not have had time to do this with Israel if ISIS had not been almost completely defeated.
That's true.
Within Syria and Iraq. And they have been. So now they've got all these weapons there. They've got all these fighters there. They're moving on to their next battle because they kind of have gotten through, for the most part, a lot of the ISIS battle. So they're saying, okay, what's next? Well, let's see what Israel will do in response to some of our provocations. Now, what we saw was a drone went in, and Israel came in with multiple fighter jets right near Damascus and took out military sites, killing Syrian military officials. So Israel's response was, again, very strong. And it's kind of Iran's move once again, and Syria's move. Do they really want to pick this fight and then give Israel a basis for attacking Iran before they've got a nuclear weapon?
Yep. We've got a lot more ahead on what is a breaking issue involving Israel and Iran, a direct conflict. This is not a proxy war. This is direct engagement. Back with more in just a moment. Hey everybody, welcome back to the broadcast. If you're just joining us, conflict over the weekend, and this was pretty direct. It's called Iran and Israel. We used to call it a proxy war. It's not so much proxy anymore. The Iranians have stationed their Revolutionary Guard and trained troops. They are utilizing their technology, and they launched an attack on Israel's sovereignty. Joining us on the phone is our legal director, Lieutenant Colonel David Benjamin. He is a lieutenant colonel in the Israeli Defense Forces, but also a lawyer in practice with us in our office in Jerusalem. David, we've been talking about the legality of this, but let's talk about what your sense is on what's going on in the northern border of Israel, now directly with Iran.
Well, at the moment it's quiet, Jay, but I think there's a great deal of uncertainty in the air. What has happened is a very, very significant escalation. And once an escalation has taken place, you can't put it back in the bottle. There's now a new precedent for a new level of hostilities, which may lead to something worse. Obviously, we hope that it won't. We hope it won't be necessary. But there's a situation now where Iran has climbed onto a very high perch And I don't know. They're going to have to find a way down, hopefully, but if they persist in their build-up in Syria and in Lebanon, Israel, as it's very clearly said, has placed very clear red lines, and is going to be acting, as it has already shown that Israel will act against this presence.
David, we've been talking about for years, and you've worked with us for years now, that we've been talking about this kind of proxy war between Israel and Iran, but it's reached a different level because what's happened right now on the northern border over the weekend was not so much proxy. It was Iranian troops with Iranian munitions that were engaging in this. And as you said, that reaches a new level. So here's I think the question. Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israel is going to respond as they have already this weekend. But Iran has put themselves in a very difficult spot because they have engaged this directly. What does that mean, and how do you address that from a law of armed conflict standpoint?
Well, as I say, it's going to be difficult for Iran to step down. Sending a drone over the border, and of course it's clearly an Iranian drone, is very significant. Now, of course, I think that what Iran is trying to do is use a tactic which we call plausible deniability. In other words, saying, what are you talking about? It was a drone. It was looking at the civil war in Syria. That's where we are. This has nothing to do with Israel. But, of course, that's a big cover story. And you have to remember that Israel, and not only Israel, I'm sure other intelligence services too, they know what Iran is up to. Okay, the public statements are one thing, but everyone seems to know what Iran is actually trying to do. They're using the Syrian civil war as a cover, as an excuse to actually build up a military array against Israel, using mainly proxy forces, whether it be Hezbollah or various Shiite militias, but also, as you pointed out, they're actually there on the ground themselves.
Yeah, and so that is what I think complicates it, too, for the United States, who, we've gone through the statement. At the end of the day, we know where the U.S. is going to side if this conflict were to, and we've seen President Trump take direct action against the Assad regime before, after those atrocities, those chemical weapons attacks. But now that the fight against ISIS it's not completely over. I don't want to overstate that. But as ISIS no longer threatens Damascus the way it used to, I think, as David said, under that whole chaos, Iran used that to keep moving weapons in. In a sense, their idea there was publicly was to keep the Assad regime in power, and that they did help with that, so that that the Assad regime is still in power. But they're not pulling back. It's not like they're saying, okay, we kept the Assad regime in power. Here we go. We're moving along. And let's not forget, this also involves Russia directly. This act really concerned the Russians because they are heavily involved, and they're meeting with the Iranians and the Syrians about this. I think they had an emergency meeting between those three governments, their representatives. So when you have Russia, Iran, Syria on one side, Israel, and then potentially the U.S. on the other, and we're not dealing with a nuclear Iran yet.
Right.
This all it puts a decision point. Is this when, is it another act by Iran and you say, okay, enough is enough? We're not just going to target Syrian sites. We're going to go further than that to send Iran a message about who they're messing with.
Yeah, so let's do this. We've got phone calls coming in. We've got David Benjamin on here, so let's take some calls.
Dennis on line one. Dennis, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dennis. Go ahead.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hey.
My concern is very simple. We have a bunch of commitments and a vastly reduced military due to Obama's cuts. What can we do to help Israel in any way? What is available?
Well, I don't. My sense of it, I'll defer to my colleagues here who have military experience. I don't. Is that this is not a situation where you need a direct military engagement of the United States. Israel's very capable of defending itself. Plus, you've got, and I'll start with Skip, you've got allies in the region that they didn't have even 5 years ago on this particular threat. Skip?
Oh, I agree with that. We have a situation that is completely different than what we've had in the past. For instance, the Sunni nations, the Sunni kingdoms, are just as afraid, if not more afraid, of a Shiite influence in Syria and Lebanon than the Israelis are. So it makes strange bedfellows, so to speak, that the Saudis and the Jordanians and others, although they may not articulate it the way we would like them to, are nonetheless cooperating with Israel because they realize the real enemy is not Israel. The real enemy now is Iran and its influence in Lebanon and Syria. So we have a difference there. We also have the Israelis have not asked for any military support in the sense of armed forces, boots on the ground. What they would desire, if they need it, is equipment and ammunitions and things like that. And I think that we are prepared to do that.
Let me go to David Benjamin, who, again, is our counsel general for our legal work in our office in Jerusalem. The question was, David, about U.S. engagement. The United States obviously already signaling its support for Israel and its right to defend itself. But we're not talking about U.S. engagement. Militarily, Israel can defend itself, especially with its new allies.
Well, Israel has had a long-standing policy of never asking for actual military assistance from the United States or from anybody else in actual boots-on-the-ground assistance. I'm sure that policy will continue. What I think the United States can do and is doing to an extent, you have to remember that where the mothership is in this whole galaxy. It's Iran, okay? It's the country of Iran. And Iran is able to conduct these operations in Syria and Lebanon, etc., okay, because it's in a position to do so. It's not feeling the pressure of sanctions. It's not feeling internal pressure. It's not feeling enough international pressure to desist from doing this. Now, one might be asking, what exactly is Iran doing there? Why would that be in Iran's interests to be on the border with Israel? And the only idea I can come up with is that actually Iran has an agenda down the line of perhaps building up its nuclear capacity, but at the same time building up a deterrent against any attack which would try and thwart their nuclear build-up. And the best deterrent they have is to have on Israel's borders a very sizable military force so they can threaten Israel with a major blows against its civilian centers if Israel or any other power actually decides to attack Iran to deal with a nuclear problem. That to me is my understanding, because it's actually difficult to get to the root of what exactly are they doing there. What do they want to achieve? And why? They can't achieve any kind of major military victory over Israel just by deploying in Syria. They'll never be able to bring the amount of hardware or manpower, etc., over there to actually do anything significant. So what exactly are they trying to achieve? They're trying to create a sort of deterrent, like on our borders, which will against a future build-up, a strategic build-up, which makes sense, internationally in terms of their grand strategy.
And I think, too, that these F-16 pilots in Israel, they said the reason why they had to take the action they did was because the amount of anti-aircraft fire. So it goes exactly to what David's saying, that it locked on. Now, they couldn't take down all those jets, but they did take down one of them. And again, that's the pathway to one of the pathways to taking out Iranian nuclear facilities. We know Russia's also sold those kind of systems to Iran.
That's going to do it for the broadcast this week. Again, the Israel issue, always the one that we're concerned about, and we're able to give you the analysis on this broadcast, and I'm sure that was helpful, and we hope it does continue to educate and inform you on an important topic. Again, a huge thank you to the entire family at the Trinity Broadcasting Network that allows us to bring this broadcast to you each and every week. And we do that. We're not paying for the airtime. Your support of TBN allows us to do it, so we encourage that. Again, you could do that by going to tbn.org. We encourage you to do that, support the great work there. We will talk to you next week.